I'm a middle-aged woman now. I've also gotten into the habit of listening to narrators read true scary stories at bedtime. I've always been interested in frightening things, starting with creature feature movies as a young child. Please forgive my snobbiness now, but there are a lot of stories that don't scare me, like where a girl was walking alone and a man came up and asked if she was single. Or someone was followed around high school by the weird kid for 4 years. Those just don't scare me. It's probably because I've had so many scary experiences. I invite you to read them as much as you'd like. Granted, some of them are due to me making really stupid choices, like in the story I'm about to tell. But a lot of them are just misfortune maybe? So like I said, I'm middle-aged now, so this happened well before there was an internet. There were no cell phones, no email, no online dating apps. But even though we didn't have that when I was a kid, I still managed to do something like those stories you hear about meeting a stranger from the internet. By the way, I'm all for meeting people from the internet, as long as you've taken the time to get to know them first, and your first few meetings are in public places. Don't do what I did. I did this because all my life, as long as I can remember, I was called boy crazy. I liked boys and thought I wanted a boyfriend from as early as 3rd grade, I think. That's why this happened when I was 11 or 12. Somehow I had gotten my hands on a CB radio. That's what truckers use to communicate with people while spending hours and hours driving. Maybe they still use them. But I had this CB radio, and it was just the coolest thing in the world to me, to think that I could talk to anyone from anywhere through the magic of this technology. So I just started talking. I talked to many people, with no idea who they were or where they were. One day I was talking to a man who was about 19 or 20. And he was in my city. And while I was only around 12, and always honest about my age, I didn't think of a 19 or 20-year-old guy talking to me as creepy then. I thought of it more as flattering. That was because I liked boys so much. He was flirting with me on the CB radio, and he asked if he could come over and see me. I wanted to meet him because he was a guy. Please understand that I was pretty sheltered back then, and at this time I really didn't know anything about sex. So when I wanted to meet this guy or any guy, the most I ever thought would happen would be a chaste kiss, mouths closed. But the idea of getting a kiss was really exciting to me. And I really didn't think age mattered. Of course, as an adult and a parent, I'd probably scalp a 19-year-old who wanted to meet one of my kids at 12. Amidst all our CB flirting on that one afternoon, I told him my address. For some reason though, I was at least smart enough not to give him my apartment number. So I knew that when he drove up I could see him and then decide if I wanted to go outside and meet him. He didn't know I lived in an apartment complex, so when he got there he parked in the middle and called out for me. I peeked out my kitchen window at him and saw a tall man of probably about 19 or 20 standing outside of a nice sports car. I don't know why, but I lost my nerve, and I did not go out to meet him. I just peeked out the window at him until he got back into his car and left. After he left, I got back to the CB radio to apologize. But I was struck speechless to hear him yelling loudly, swearing at me, furious that I had stood him up. He was swearing like I'd never heard, and he said that if he ever got a hold of me, he'd kill me. He went on about it, yelling on the public airwaves for quite a long time. Obviously, this scared me a lot, and I couldn't even respond. I don't know where that feeling came from that stopped me from going outside to meet him, because I normally would have done something like that. But I realized soon after, when hearing that temper and what a scary person he was, it was very fortunate that I had not. I didn't know it then, but I realized years later that he was a child predator, and clearly capable of doing very bad things. First off, I would like to state that I am a 16-year-old female and I live in a small town in New York. I'm short for my age. I'm 5 feet 3 and I weigh 124 pounds. These events have been going on for around 2 years now. I will be using the name Ariel as my name to protect my identity. I have always been very active on the internet, since I was about 8 to 9 years old. When I was around 14, I decided to join this group chat on this website. I don't recall what it was called. It was a website where you could exchange each other's kicks, Skype, phone numbers, and stuff of that sort. Being the ignorant child I was, I put my information on the website. I used Kik and Skype. For some reason, I didn't give out my phone number. I only got a few people who actually replied and texted me on Kik and Skype, but none really stood out to me. Except one. There was this one older guy that started texting me. He claimed he was a 16-year-old and he said his name was Alexander. We were mainly interested in the same things: video games, the outdoors, and animation. Everything was fine. Or so I thought. We would text every day and we would talk about innocent things, like how our day was and what we had planned for the weekend. Nothing too out of the ordinary. We would usually go from Kik to Skype pretty frequently. I would turn on my camera and he never turned on his. That was one sign I didn't pay attention to. After talking after 3 months, things starting escalating. What I mean by that is he started telling me to do sexual things on camera so he could see. When I would say no, he would say he knew where I lived. I had some common sense and ended the call right there and then. I was frightened because he never acted that way towards me. He ended up calling my Skype about 20 times. I had to shut down my computer because I couldn't take it anymore. I know what most of you are wondering. Where were my parents? Why weren't they parenting me not to talk to strangers and stuff like that? Well, let's just say my parents are very careless. Not in the way like they don't care about me or don't love me, because they do love me a lot. They trusted me enough to let me have a phone and computer. Anyways, back to the story. Alexander started calling about 5 times every day, and if I didn't pick up he would start texting my Kik. I didn't ever think to block because I blocked him once before and he just kept creating a new Kik and a new Kik each time. I also had a Facebook. Yeah, a 14-year-old with a Facebook smart. Alexander ended up finding my Facebook. He would say things like, "I know where you live," and "I see you have your mom on Facebook." I ended up uninstalling Skype, Kik, and I ended up deactivating my Facebook. I went on with my life until a year later. I get a text to my phone from an unknown number that read, "Hi sexy. Remember me? You looked amazing today in your tight dress with your black socks and hat." I replied with, "Who's this?" I thought it was one of my guy friends who was playing a prank on me to mess with me. I texted every one of my guy friends from my contact list, asking if they were messing around with me. They all replied with no. That's when everything hit the fan. I received all of these texts when I arrived home from school. That day, I was wearing a tight dress, hat, and black socks. The number finally replied, "Honey, it's Alexander. Don't you remember? How could you forget? I finally get to have you all to myself." I looked at that text and almost threw up. I was beyond terrified. I locked all the doors. I was going to be home alone till around 6 p.m. I never texted the number back and it kept texting me. I ended up blocking the number later and falling asleep. About a week later, I'm walking home from school on a hot day. Do you ever get that feeling where you feel like you're being followed or watched? That's the feeling I got. Of course I was walking alone. I slowly turned my head. I tried to make it look like I was looking for a house number. I notice a black car following behind me. I tightly hold on to my cell phone. I was planning to make a break for it as soon as I hit a certain street. A street where it was 2 blocks away from my house. Let's call the street Shady Way. When I hit Shady Way, I booked it. I ran right behind the house that was behind my house. I ran in through the back door, slamming it shut behind me. I was crying. I locked every door and ran to my bedroom upstairs. I felt so sick. That's when I felt my phone buzz. The next text disturbed me and will haunt me for the rest of my life. It read as follows, "I know where you live. Even inside you can't hide from me." I called 911. I explained that a guy who claimed to be 16 when I was talking to him is an old man and how he found where I lived. The operator said a police officer was 5 minutes away. It felt like forever. I heard a hard knock at the door and ran downstairs. I opened the door and it was the officer. The officer explained that they saw a suspicious black car drive by, but couldn't get the license plate number because it took off. Officers around here are practically useless. I ended up telling my mom and dad what happened. They just said we would file a report and have some hope that he would get caught. What could we charge him with? He never laid a hand on me. Every day, I walked from my home to school. I practically lived in a constant state of anxiety. Even writing this now gives me anxiety. I could never have a friend or a parent drive me, and I was too young to drive. So walking was the only way. My grades were starting to slip at school. I didn't stay awake on classes. My life was falling apart. I never slept at night, so I slept in classes. Every day, I could have sworn I would saw that man or Alexander, or if that's even his name. I did have some friends to help me through this time. I felt like my friend, who we will call Violet, understood me. Violet was a sweet and understanding girl. She was only 1 year older than me at the time. I invited her over one weekend where my parents would be out of town. We stayed up late into the morning hours and gossiped about guys and everything else girls usually talk about at sleepovers. Then, it happens. My phone goes off. I grab it. I gasp as I read was on the screen. "Hi Ariel, how are you? I see you're home alone with your friend, Violet. I have had enough of this at this point." So I reply as Violet begs me not to feed into what he wants. "Oh, you're watching me? Ah, okay. Where am I right now? What am I wearing?" He quickly replies, "You're in your bedroom. You're wearing a shirt with a skull on it with shorts. Your friend is wearing a white t-shirt and shorts too." I pause thinking of what to say next. I'm very scared. I end up calling my mom and dad to come home early. I ended up explaining what happened. I was scared and so was Violet. My family and I couldn't do anything. He didn't hurt any one of us. A few months later, we ended up moving for financial reasons. We moved to another small town in New York. I ended up forgetting about Alexander for a while. It was peaceful and I didn't worry about me having to watch my back every second. About a week ago, I received another message from an unknown number. A few weeks ago, on a Saturday night, I let my dog Riley into the backyard. He was out there for about 10 minutes, so I opened the back door to call him inside. He didn't come inside, which was weird because he usually did. So, I closed the back door and waited. After about 5 or so minutes, I opened the back door to let him in. "Riley," I called. No response. "Riley, come inside, night night." Again, no response. This is where things get weird. I whistled for him and then, from the other side of the yard, I heard someone whistle back, the same exact whistle I had whistled. "What the F?" I muttered under my breath. I thought it was just my imagination, so I whistled again, and again, the person whistled back. I shut the door and locked it. I went to my grandparents' bedroom and looked out the window. I saw nothing. I went back to the kitchen where the back door was and flipped the porch light on. I went back to the bedroom and looked out the window. Again, there was nothing to be seen. After that, I decided to go to the living room and tell my grandparents what happened. My grandpa told me to grab a flashlight and Riley's leash and check it out. He said the whistling was probably just the neighbors across the alley. I grabbed a flashlight and Riley's leash and turned the porch light off because I was afraid of what I might see with it on, so afraid that I didn't even plan to use the flashlight. I am a small and skinny, 16-year-old male, and I am not that good at fighting. As soon as I stepped out into the cold dark night, I wished I would have gone to my room and grabbed my baseball bat. Slowly, I made my descent off the porch steps. I know I am sounding like a little wuss in this story, but the shit is scary. One time last year, in the middle of the night, I heard someone slam the cellar door shut. That scared me so bad, but I was even more scared now. I stopped on the second to last step and looked around the yard. I finally got enough courage to call out. "Riley?" I called. Then, from right behind me, I heard a soft voice whisper, "Riley." I turned to see a face peering at me from under the porch. I couldn't even scream. The face peering at me was a crazed face, looked like a crackhead, which is common where I live. I ran up a few stairs, kicked the dude in the face through the spaces between them so he couldn't grab at me, and ran inside. I told my grandpa what happened and he got his gun and came back out with me. We searched the whole yard, no sign of the crazy guy or my dog Riley. The back gate was wide open and there was blood on the stairs that the man's face was at. The blood was from me kicking him. The cops were called, of course, and I explained everything to them. After the cops spoke to me, they left. Haven't heard anything from them since. The next morning we found Riley standing in a random driveway, which was good. My guess as to what happened is that the crazy man was already in my yard when I let Riley out, and he was on some other side of the yard where Riley didn't notice him. Riley must have discovered that the gate was opened and left to wander around. It was a pretty terrifying experience and I am glad that my dog wasn't hurt.